Dadaism, the word Dada, it indicates people have a literature today which translates as the nonsensical literature. All right, nonsensical is not nonsense, it is nonsensical, which doesn't make sense anymore. All right, this was a group of anti-art, should I say art? Right. Anti-art movement, because suddenly art is also not making sense in a world where reason is not making sense. At this particular point, we're also saying that art is not making sense. All right, so this was a sign of foolish naivete joy in procreation and preoccupation with the baby carriage. So it was like, it was and nothing makes sense, like a foolish naivete. Naivete is somebody who is very naive, who's very, very pure, very innocent. Maybe you can call about him as a fool. Joy in procreation and preoccupation with the baby carriage. So here we are looking at, this Dada talks about the gibberish, how a child might, use the words Dada, doesn't make any sense, right? So that nonsensical is what is being portrayed by these words, Dada. So they rejected the cultural standards and values. You're already, they were dissatisfied with the traditional definition of what art could be. I will tell you about this. You might have seen, everybody might have seen the portrait of Mona Lisa. So here you see at this particular point in Mona Lisa, somebody has drawn a mustache, and also somebody has drawn, exactly, you might have seen the goat beard, right? So exactly like that, like you might have seen how Will Smith keeps a beard in Aladdin, exactly like that, a beard for Mona Lisa. What you're doing, you're just breaking the values and standards that has been associated with art to bring about an anti-art movement. Why? It is not that they're not passionate about art, it's only because why even art is not making sense in this war-ridden landscape. All right, so it was bringing about a total freedom in art, and then, total freedom in art, where maybe you can say, is this the coming of modern art? No, this is not modern art. This is to say that we draw an art which doesn't make any sense per se. All right. So like I said, this is the anti-art movement. You see that this is also talk about this is the kind of response that artists had towards the disgust and the resentment and the vengeance that they had against war. All right, so their main purpose was that you consider that these are the standards of the society. These standards of the society are suddenly being washed off, all because of war. Now what? That is their question. Their outrage is being poured, their shock, their confusion, their loss, their disillusionment of the artists as the movement is being showcased through this Dadaism. So there you'd see, it was all expected. See, even today, the kind of canonical literature that we follow, it expects us to behave in a very conventional manner. So we are trying to actually outdo these conventions, because did these conventions help not destroy the aftermath of war? No, it didn't happen. Did it preserve the kind of environment which existed before war? No. So what's the point of maintaining all these conventions when it did not protect me from war, when it did not protect me from disillusionment? That's the reason why we came up with surrealism and even punk rock. Why are we coming with this feeling of surrealism? Because we have lost our faith in this world. This way we're looking for an afterworld. Recently we saw this, right? We do this right today, like at this particular point, especially during the COVID. You might have considered, there was this on Facebook, there was a virtual tour of, Egypt. So, people were taking a virtual tour. Why were they doing? Why is this? You see many of these people, many of these kids in the malls, taking into this metaverse. Why are they going to this metaverse? They can escape. A surrealism is an escape from the horrors of the war-inflicted land. All right, so this was a cultural phenomenon, and it was considered, it was to break free the taboos, the offensive, and all that what was considered childish. All right, so because we were always expected to act according to the canons of literature, the canons preserve and portray ourselves in a conventional manner, and now we are suddenly telling you that all this did not preserve or protect us from war. Then why to put up this facade of conventions? That is what is being challenged because of Dadaism. Now also, you understand that this came about in Zurich in Switzerland. I told you about this. Hugo Ball, founder of the nightclub, was thought to coin the name Dada. While there is no consensus on how the name came about, some understand that Dada evokes a childish, silly nature. All right. So why is it? And it is, Dada, that's why it's Dadaism, something very silly, something which is very childish. Maybe to say that to hold on to all these conventions is silly, because it doesn't matter at all. There's no yardstick. Tomorrow is going to, somebody's going to measure and tell, did you live by these societal standards or not? No, you're actually reduced to ashes. You're raw in the aftermath of war. Also, people, maybe it's also in one more way, like, under this concept of Dadaism, I also see the write-up of William Golding. William Golding wrote this novel by name Lord of the Flies. And Lord of the Flies portrays about two sects of people. One sect of people were the rational ones, and the other sect of people were the ones who came about with their barbarian nature. So if they are really saying that we have to preserve these standards in a juncture where there are no laws, okay, so eventually our barbaric attitude comes out, okay, and then that is a disease of being human. So suddenly, when nothing makes sense, that is what it is. What a child's language, gibberish, doesn't make sense. So that is why it is Dada. All right. So this is, and you're looking at an anti-authoritarian nature, like nothing is making sense. So your conventions, your authoritarianism is definitely not going to make sense to the world. So we have nowadays nonsensical literature is a part of mainstream literature today. You might have seen a lot of nonsensical movies in popular culture which has come about to be. Why? It is just to break free from the kind of outlooks which exist, in order to just perhaps tell that it's very silly, or that silliness is what is portraying to us the world that we are a part of. It's very silly, it's very childish. That's what it is. And this is to expand the boundaries of the art world. Okay. Now, it was also the fact that, many of these people found their refuge. Many of these artists came about as a movement, especially in Zurich. And then, they were all very angry, and then they wanted to protest against the conventional tradition of art which came about. And then they were actually against all these isms, be it nationalism, rationalism, materialism. See, nationalism is what is the pretext against which we pursue war. All right. Rationalism, we are asked to think in a very rational way. War is what? Because we think that war is a consequence of the mind, a fight of the minds. And then again, you have materialism. Materialism is again modern age. So we are completely against all of this. Nothing matters. Nationalism, rationalism, materialism, everything goes to dust. So nothing makes sense. That silliness is what is another ism. We have given up. War is senseless. That senselessness is actually attributed because of this Dadaism. Right. And this is very nicely that is being put up where you say that we who are the non-artists, we will create non-art, since art and everything else in the world has no meaning anyway. Right. You understand, like, all because of the consequence of war, all that which was held dear has no meaning anywhere. And then, and see people, we suddenly, think that, there's one more reason, like I said, art for art's sake. When you look at these paintings, you think that these are going to inspire you to lead a more able life. Fine, I might lead a noble life, but then the war has shown us the atrocities of humankind. So where will I find the inspiration to lead a more ideal and noble life? Looking at these pictures, it doesn't make sense at all. So it is saying that it's like a hobby horse in French, or it's like a baby talk, a catchphrase, which makes no sense at all. That is Dada. That is what we look at. Now, you understand this Dada, the only rule was never follow any rules. So it is like a nonsensical point of writing. Under the sea, one might understand this under the backdrop of absurd literature. Like I said, when Beckett wrote, what was that? Samuel Beckett wrote Waiting for Godot. It always used those words, nothing, 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 nothing. Doesn't make sense at all. All right. The entire backdrop, when you just read the play, it doesn't make any sense to you. That nonsensical attribute was brought to art and to paintings. All right, they were extremely serious about it because they felt that all those paintings which are actually inspiring idealism, they are not of any purpose now. That's very silly. Okay, so they were, their revolt was against the bourgeoisie rationalism. All right, they felt that, war was extremely selfish. All right, because the war, definitely the soldiers die, but the war who are affected because of the war are the poor. All right, so they felt that, this is all a consequence of the bourgeoisie, rationalism, and they felt that, many people are dying because of, this kind of an egotism and egoism which exists with war. And then, they felt that, art should not give about any kind of inspiration, but it should give about disgust. And that disgust was only brought about in art by the Dadaists, okay, as we call about. All right, so as you observe, Dadaism came about in basically paintings. All right, some people translate and look at Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot also as a consequence of Dadaism, but then no, Dadaism is not a literary movement, it was a movement in art. Exactly how, maybe you can also look at Dadaism and consequence to the pre-Raphaelite poetry. What does the pre-Raphaelite poetry do? Gives a lot of detail to idealism in poetry. That idealism is something which is actually scrapped off in your Dadaism kind of writings, or in Dadaism culture, as we look at. All right. With this, we wind up the lecture. Like I said, most of these movements might have portrayed a negative, connotation of war. Maybe might have portrayed the literature, art, literary, social movements which emerged in the aftermath of war. All right. So that is what we look at it in modern age. In fact, if you observe the kind of movements which emerged after this, made us give some kind of a semblance, or made us give some kind of a peace in the scenario that we are part. See, we are also a consequence of, let's say, the war age, or let's say the aftermath of war. Maybe you can say the freedom struggle, the Indian freedom struggle. We are in the aftermath of war. We are also, the kind of people who are living in the age of war, let's say, because of the constant India-Pakistan war which happens, or let's say, we are living as a consequence of one more thing, the lost generation. We are actually the lost generation for that matter. And then under this particular scenario, we understand how to make peace with it. So that is what is when we delve into the postmodern age. True, many people might look at all these factors which have emerged to preserve the integrity and culture of Britain under the aftermath of war. True on those one hands, but then it had its own, the literature which emerged after this had its own sense of uniqueness, which cannot be warded off. Like, it's not, time and again, we always make an effort to go back to the past, all right? But here, right now, we are trying to focus on literature which is just a consequence of war. Why is it that we have to go back to war? Let us write about the age that we are a part of. Now we have become a part of this. Let's write about the age. And that's what it emerged. People after this, writers did not long for the age which existed before this, but rather made peace with it and tried to look at existence in this war-shattered universe. Right. So with this, I end my lecture for today. I guess we have a couple of minutes for
thank you, Dr. Prithivika. We enjoyed your lecture as usual, and given the timeline that you were asked to prepare, I think you have done well. The concepts were cleared by giving various examples. I'm sure the participants were able to follow your lecture closely. We would appreciate if you have any e-resource or any e-materials you share with us. The same will be shared with the participants in the form of research papers, articles, or whatever. We will share that. Now there are questions. May I request the participants to please either raise your hand or you type your questions. There are few in the chat box, or you can raise your hand directly. You can ask the question. Mridul C. Brinal asks that, did we ever had any kind of anti-art movement such as Dadaism in Indian context?
Yeah, we did. Raja Ravi Verma paintings, one of those where not exactly the Dadaism kind of movement, but then Raja Ravi Verma's paintings also made an effort to move from that kind of idealism which existed then. All right, they were not nonsensical, because Dadaism is actually attributed with nonsensical kind of a writing. Today, in many of those modern art, what you talk about as modern art, they look very nonsensical. Like, for example, some of those paintings only have, trickles of blood. All right. And then, you see that as maybe, modern art. Nonsensical, yes. Modern art today in any platform might look to be nonsensical. But if you have to look at something revolutionary, that was Raja Ravi Verma's paintings. You might have understood as to how he painted gods and goddesses and normal, lay men and women, as gods and goddesses. And that was quite, revolutionary. It was not nonsensical, but it was, revolutionary. Also, you need to understand that, we are looking at Dadaism under the pretext of World War. World War is very different from the kind of partition that we experience. The partition that you might have seen is only the Indo-Pakistan and the literature which originated in Indo-Pakistan, or let's say partition literature. But World War in its connotation is very different from what had happened in the Indian scenario. But then, yes, I can look at only modern art today, and the second one being Raja Ravi Verma's paintings, which have been revolutionary to break the kind of idealism which existed with respect to art.
Agnimitra Roy's question is, did Harlem Renaissance influence Malcolm X? And is Dadaism influencing modern animated comedies like Minions?
Did Harlem Renaissance influence? Right, absolutely. It was a coming up of, even, like I said, punk rock. And, definitely it influenced. It is not an influence, rather. Harlem Renaissance perhaps empowered Malcolm X, for that matter. It was not an influence. It was just a platform, for that matter. Dadaism animated comedies like Minions. See, Minions do make sense. They're not meaningless. Like the comics, what you see with respect to Minions, they are not meaningless. Dadaism is meaningless. All right, imagine in that the idea of Dadaism is to move against idealism. Minions did not have that effort. For that matter, we will look at all comic literature. Tomorrow, you will look at the Tinkle comics also as, as an effect of Dadaism. No, Dadaism is where you are breaking free from idealism. So that is not something what we see here with Minions. Minions do make sense. It's not that you are, meaninglessness is not something what is associated with Minions. So yes, Dadaism does make, Dadaism for that matter is very different from what you see in Minions. So I don't consider that Dadaism influenced Minions, no.
Then there's a question by Ongona, and Ongona's question is, can Me Too movements be considered as muckrakeism?
Me Too movements weren't, right, they came about with muckrakerism, maybe because they were journalistic accounts. I guess that's the reason why you're talking about muckrakerism. My idea is they were not fictionalized. Today, we do not have any kind of writing in Me Too movement, which has been fictionalized and put to a novel, which is a consequence of Me Too movement yet. So you've not seen it, for that matter. So no, I cannot say that they're a part of muckrakerism. Muckrakerism is something which came about. Yes, you might talk about, the Chinmay, because of Chinmay, which came about as a Me Too movement, true. But that was an original account. It was not fictionalized. Many of those muckrakerism, what they wrote was fictionalized into writings, okay, but inspired by true events. But that kind of a literature, maybe it might originate sooner. Me Too is just originated, it's just an year and two old. So maybe we can look at the kind of literature, women literature, which are originating now as an output of muckrakerism. But as of now, I don't see any first-hand fiction writing by women, which has come from women journalists and which is a part of Me Too movement. There are accounts, right? But they are not brought into literature yet. Muckrakerism is in fact a literature movement, literary movement. You do not see yet any account of such writings as of now.
Right. We take the last question by Nilesh, and Nilesh's question is, what were the events that could have influenced the beginning of Harlem Renaissance?
Here, what were the events that could have influenced the beginning of Harlem Renaissance? Maybe, what was that? The establishment of colonies. All right. For example, when the British, because it was an American movement, when the British conquered the American colonies at that particular point. So, the Americans were colonized, and for that matter, even your Africans were colonized at that particular point, right? But generally, we look at only Africans as colonized. At this particular point, we are looking at the Americans as colonized, and we are looking at the Africans as colonized as well. So maybe in order to make peace with that kind of similitude that they are a part of. Both Americans and Africans are a part of that similitude. So that, brought about, Harlem Renaissance. And also, for that matter, you understand that because many Africans were already a part of the American culture, they were becoming a part of the American society. They did not want to become Americans. They were not completely Africans because they were in America. They wanted to assert their individuality. You understand that this is a modern age, and then this is an establishment of individualism. So that quest for individualism necessitated the Harlem Renaissance. Because Renaissance is any kind of an upheaval, like, what do you say, a preserving of cultural and literary heritage. So maybe that need might have come about. See, there are varied reasons, because once we explore, and as I'm talking, I can think of varied reasons. One being the diasporic reason. See, I might feel that, I'm so alienated in my land and I want to keep my culture intact. And that's the reason I, produce my kind of a music. Okay. So I want to preserve my music. So maybe that could be the reason that they came up with their kind of music. It also could be because they wanted to keep their roots intact in writing. And that's why they perhaps wrote about their culture and, wrote about their culture in their writings. Maybe that could be the reason. A diasporic reason could be one. A rootlessness, suddenly we are rooted. We wanted to show that we are not yet Americans. Okay, we are rooted in our own culture. That need might have propagated this particular thought. So in short, if you might ask me, it's just cultural preservation. All right, so that's the need, what we're doing, just cultural preservation, literary preservation of the Africans in America. Okay, it might also be because tomorrow, if the generation moves on, tomorrow there are many African Americans and their children. So they have children and they move on and they settle in America. What is it that we are going to give it to them? So for them, we create a repository of literature and a repository of Renaissance. And that is what, goes as inspiration for these kids. So maybe that could be a reason which brought about Harlem Renaissance. Also because to just give about, see today, if it is exactly like asking, in this contemporary world, why is it that we are going for Carnatic music? Suddenly, today we see a lot of people who go back to, like, for example, a recent trend in many, for example, Pakistani Coke studio. What are they doing? They are, fusing Western music and, let's say, typical Punjabi music. They're fusing in. Why? Just to keep that indigenous culture alive. That's it. That was the reason that, brought about Harlem Renaissance.
Right. Thank you so much. I think it was a very engaging session as well as enriching. The examples which Dr. Prithivika gave when she was discussing about each movement was something which I found to be very correlative, very easy to understand the concepts that she was talking about. And as you all know, that in my opinion, her pedagogical skills are very good, and I appreciate that. And I get to, and of course, it goes without saying her energy, non-ending energy. After she sat for 1.5 hours, she spoke for 2 hours now. So sometimes when we meet, I will ask you the secret of the energy that you get from. And it's good always to have young dynamic research-based academicians like you interact with you. We get a lot of things to learn from young scholars like you all. Take care. It was a pleasure on behalf of Team DAATH VOYAGE. Good night. See you soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you, sir.